Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a very simple pair of winding sticks. Now, what some may think is an antique tool, it actually is very relevant today. Great and accurate way to determine when your work is nice and flat. Stay with me, I'll show you. So these are my winding sticks. They have little finger indents so you can pull them apart. There's dowels on one side, matching holes in the other to help keep them nice and straight. Although these are made out of torrefied maple and that stays nice and stable anyway. I also have holly inlays on the corner and holly center finding dots. I'll explain what that's for. You want to put your winding sticks on the board, centered. It's a lot harder to find the center if you don't have either marked, meaning how do I find the center of this and the center of this? But identify the center on your winding sticks and it's pretty easy to guess on the center of the board. Now, they're also shaped. We're going to simplify some of this to make it a little bit easier. We actually sell these. They come in a tube like this, all wrapped up in foam, and they're very effective. And as I mentioned, the torrefied maple, which is where they cook the wood at a temperature that would normally burn it, but in the absence of oxygen it doesn't. But it changes the cellular structure so it doesn't absorb moisture, and that way it doesn't move. We're going to talk about the best wood to use. But our design today is going to be simplified so that in minimal time you can actually produce a pair of winding sticks that you'll be able to use to determine the accuracy of the board you're working on. Everything you build. Okay, when it comes time for selecting the wood, you want material that's going to be as stable as possible, the least amount of movement over time. The bottom side, well, the bottom of your winding stick needs to be flat or straight, so when you sit it on a flat surface, it doesn't pivot in the middle. And of course, the opposite edge has to be parallel to this one, so occasionally you're going to have to check them. As I mentioned, these are made out of torrefied. I'll show you another piece of torrefied maple. But the only change you notice is the color. Now, I'm not sure you're going to have access to this, but I get mine from Exotic Woods in Burlington, Ontario. And it does change the strength of it substantially. It doesn't really matter on winding sticks, but if you're doing something in small pieces, it's not very strong. It loses a lot of strength. But somehow in the change of the structure of the cell, it doesn't absorb moisture, and because it doesn't absorb moisture, it doesn't expand and contract with changes in relative humidity. Here's some other examples. Actually, we used to use a lot of Padauk, which is an orange-colored wood, but we could buy it quarter-sawn. There's a piece of quarter-sawn mahogany, and providing the wood was dry and in equilibrium with the surrounding atmosphere, you can see the grain running like this, perpendicular to the face. So that's going to present the least amount of change. Now I've got a piece of white oak here, and that's flat sawn. So that's not going to be as stable. The piece I'm actually going to use is another piece of white oak I found, and you can see how the grain is running perpendicular to the face. So there's no guarantee ever with this stuff, but that's your best bet. All right, let's talk about the dimensions. Now, you can make them any length you want, and the longer they're going to be, the more accurate they're going to be, simply because if you think about it, you're setting the winding stick on this piece of wood, and the farther out that goes, the more the slightest bit of wind or twist in the board, it's going to get exaggerated the farther out you are. But there's a limit on what we need. Mine are 20 inches. We're going to try to duplicate these. 20 inches in length. The pieces are 2 inches in width. And we've got them at the thickest point, they're 9/16. At the top, they taper down to 1/4 of an inch. So you can go ahead, get whatever wood you're going to use, and mill it up to that size. We'll cut the taper after. So you're going to want 2 inches by 20 inches by 9/16 of an inch. 2 pieces. A couple of suggestions for you. First, I wouldn't use a thick piece and then cut it in half. That's going to be unstable. And second, if you have time, I would rough out the pieces, leave them a little bit thick, a little bit wide, a little bit long, sticker them or set them, actually too like this, just set them on their edge somewhere, leave them alone for a couple of weeks, let them acclimate, and come back. Now, I'd actually probably do 3 or 4 pieces and then take the 2 best. If they twist on you, there's a good chance they may continue to twist. But at least let any stress out from that little bit of minimal amount of milling that you've done, and then from there you're going to have a better chance of having them stay nice and stable. I looked it up one time to see why traditionally they were tapered, and the only information I could find that made any sense was it just made it a little more stable because it was heavier at the bottom as at the top. Yeah, I don't know how valuable that is, but I think it just looks a little more graceful than 2 clunky pieces that might get mistaken for scrap. So I have carefully milled these. Now I still want to get rid of the saw marks, but I set them on there, and you can see they don't pivot in the middle, which is the most critical thing. Do not want them to pivot in the middle. Problem if they pivot in the middle, that means you got a high spot. So depending on where you set it on their board, if you're one side or the other, they're going to tip either this way or that way, and it's not going to give you an accurate reading. So the next thing we want to do is actually have a close look at these and see if there's any defects. What we're going to do, if we use this as an example, is we're going to go over to the table saw, and we're going to slice off this piece to give it that shape. So here's the chance to get rid of any blemishes. I don't see any on that one, and I don't necessarily see any on this one either. So I guess it won't matter. Put this in the vise and mark this out. I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch at the top. That is 11/16. So if we come up 11/16. Sometimes when it's hard to see on something like that, if you take some colored masking tape, I'll put that on there so that it's flush with one side. Now I'm going to have to trim it. Now we can see our line. So we want 11/16 and 1/4. So I want to remove that. Easiest to do that on the table saw, and we need to know what angle it is. So if we use a protractor, we can figure that out. That's at 90. Sit that on a securely. We don't have a very wide spot to sit it on. That looks to be, if I could count, 10, 14 degrees. Can't quite see that. No, 15 degrees. So that will set the table saw for 15 degrees. Now we do want corners, and if you want to get really cheap, you could simply paint them white. But we're gonna inlay them. If you don't have any holly, we can use a piece of aspen. That's pretty white. You could go dark too if you wanted, but we'll use white. I'm gonna cut these just with a handsaw, and we can use a router plane. They don't need to be very big. If you look at the size of these, they're relatively small. So what we need to do is mark this out. Just get us some idea about how big we'll make them. I think that's plenty. So that's going to be about half, well, we'll go 1/2 inch. So mark 1/2 inch there. Now I'm going to use my marking gauge. I don't want this to be very thick. So I'll set my marking gauge for what I think will be the thickness of the material, or what I want. Let's see if we can actually use a rule. There's no reason to go an 1/8. I'm going to go just a little bit more than a 1/16 of an inch. Less material we have to remove. So what I need to do is follow this face. I'm going to put a line on here so I know where to stop. And a line up here. And we'll start from the end, or the edge. Nice thing about this style of marking gauge is you can simply roll it to get that last little bit. Hey, if you like this video, we have more. Our newsletter has subscriber-only content, monthly discount on tools, and anything we bring out that's new, subscribers get first crack at it. Click on the link below. Let's get back to work. We may have to prop that up. I'll stick something underneath there. That's good. We can always clean this up with a chisel if we don't get a good cut right from the saw. Move that in a little more. Don't go below your gauge line. And we're going to do the other side as well. Okay, I'm going to saw most of this off. I'm using my little 3/4 dovetail saw. I have to follow 2 lines at once. Now, to make that precise and to ensure a good glue joint, I'm going to use my small router plane. This is a Lee Nielsen product. Can I get down there? Yeah. That way part of it's off at the end, and it allows me to come in from the side and do a little bit of a paring cut. Now you got to apply a lot of downward pressure. Ah, shoot, that broke out. A lot of downward pressure. Grains run the wrong way. To this hand. Now I'm going to have to go deeper. So that tore on me, tore quite badly, so I'm going to have to readjust this. I'll try to get down. I'm not going to try to do it all in one step, but I'm going to go down to a little lower. I'll come from this end and just use corner of the blade and just pare across. Lots of pressure on my right hand, keeping that from dipping down. I still have that torn chunk right there, so I got quite a bit to remove. I know this is a thumb wheel, but I like to use the screwdriver to get it good and tight. That should be the bottom of that cavern. Just use the corner. Stick a little shearing cut. Now, I didn't saw down deep enough for this error, so I got to come in here and I'm just going to cut so that those fibers will stop right there and they won't run down. Just nibble away at it. Now that's not enough to worry about. Make sure it's nice and clean. Now I'll come in with my chisel. You may have been able to do this with your chisel actually, but I had that router plane that's Very precise and easy to use. All right, now I'm going to go to make the other side that same depth. Now I want to get rid of the tears on this, but I just planed the other one. I want to show you what's going on. So the grain is running this in this direction. It's parallel right here. And then from here to here, it's running in this direction. And then it's parallel right there. So I've sharpened the blade and I've got the throat down really tight. And hopefully that will give me the tear protection that I need, and also a really light pass. We've done videos on dealing with figured wood. We'll actually leave a link below for that if you need some refreshers. So there's a piece of aspen, pretty good contrast. Actually, the edge is a little bit yellow. This top part's white. That may just be because it came right off of the saw. I actually like the look of this a little bit better. So I'm going to go over and cut a strip on the table saw, just a fat eighth, and we cut it by hand because of the size of the pieces. Right. And we'll just shoot a nice square edge on that. Take the piece and just mark it. Doing here. Now I'm going to use cyanacrylate for this. So we'll take these two pieces, put the activator on. I'm using medium just because this has been sitting around a while, so it's gotten a little bit on the thick side. Didn't mean to get it all over. Don't have long, got to get it in the right spot. Now I can trim this just using a small crosscut saw up against the scrap. That's on a bit of a slope. Now we'll clean that up. We haven't planed these. We haven't planed the saw marks off of either edge as well, but we need to clean that up now. So put it back on the bench and get my plane out. plane in as opposed to planing out. So I'll turn this out, come back from the other side on this one. Ends. Now I'm going to shoot the ends. So I got to pull it out from the fence. Cut a little chamfer on there first so that I don't blow that out. Then flip it over. That's clean. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so we're going to want a center finder. So I've got a stamp. It's not a stamp, what's it called? Die. Just a 0 instead of a number. Find the center. Shouldn't mark on there, but I'll use my pencil option. And we'll just set that right on there. Not terribly obvious, but if we wanted to, we could trace it. Yeah, it doesn't look like how it was actually done. Now the last thing we want to do is shoot those edges, and I don't have a shooting board long enough, so what I'm going to do is use my bench as my shooting board. I need a couple of blocks of wood to prop it up on so that it stays up high enough to get into the blade, and I'll show you what I mean. Blade doesn't go all the way to the bottom, so this has to be raised up so it's in the blade. Now, the blocks of wood are the same thickness. Now I should be able to just go right along and make sure that I'm taking a really light pass because the grain's all over the place. A little more. That thing you see me turning is something we came up with a few years ago called an adjustar. It makes it so much easier to adjust the depth of your blade. Still see saw marks on there. Try to make continuous passes so that you're taking the same amount off over the entire length. Now I'm just looking to see if there's any table saw marks left, and I can still see some. Maybe one more. All right, let's check that. That looks good. Now we'll turn over and do the top. You always want to be pushing directly opposite of the blade. Okay, no saw marks on there. All right, now we'll do the same thing on this one. Got to be careful because those little inlays, we don't want to tear them off. Be aware which way the grain's running. Now to make them a little more comfortable to use, you want to get rid of those sharp edges. So I'll just take my block plane. I've got the throat down quite tight. And at about a 45 degree, cut a chamfer. I'm not going to touch that corner, but I'll do every other edge. Now, you don't have to put a finish on, but it'll help keep things a little cleaner. This is a Renaissance wax. I like it because it's one coat. According to the manufacturer, you don't get any extra benefit from putting on multiple coats. And as soon as you put it on, it's ready to wipe off. I just leave a little rag in there so you're not soaking up a whole bunch of material in your applicator every time. Makes it feel nice too. Well, there you go with a coat of wax on them. Every once in a while you want to check them, compare edges. They got to be really close. Check all 4 edges. And if you have to, you can go over and adjust them. What I do, if they're no longer laying flat, I'll adjust that on my, just like I set up with my shooting board using my bench. Take a little bit out of the middle if it's pivoting in the middle. Once you get that to sit flat on a known flat surface, then take that over to the table saw and just ever so lightly trim it so that this edge is parallel to that one. Then you just go in and shoot those marks off again. Throw another little coat of wax on. And you get a pair of winding sticks that will up your game. The more accurate your individual pieces, the better your overall piece will be. Good luck. If you enjoy my method of work and like my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos to help take your woodworking to the next level. I've always said better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the plane and chisel icon below, it'll take you to our site and introduce you to all the tools that we actually manufacture right here in our shop. It'll also give you information on our in-person and online workshops.